Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Now, depending on where you're situated geographically, and for some of you, we can't tell where you're situated geographically. I see some of our panelists have their virtual backgrounds up. You're on day who knows what of social distancing at this point. You've been taking classes, you've been getting ready for your internships, all from the comfort of your own home. But if there's one silver lining in this kind of coronavirus cloud, it's the power of networks. And that's one thing that Forté always relies on. And we have a network of really strong board members and school partners who really jumped at this chance to be able to present MBA students with information and answer questions about how are you handling things these days. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to one of our longtime friends, a current board member, and Gary, I don't know, king of NYU or something. I don't even know. So I'll just send it over to you right now.
Yeah, it's funny that term king has come up in the political circles recently, so I don't know if I want to be associated with being a king right now, but I will say that I've enjoyed my time. No, that's okay. I've enjoyed my time, at NYU Stern, and so greetings to everyone as well, too. It's great to have you all here. We have a terrific group that's going to talk to you about how you can be engaged in this kind of business school in what's now our new normal. Just to give you a little sense about myself, I'm Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at NYU Stern. I'm an NYU Stern alum from way back when, that's all I'll say, and worked at USC Marshall and also UCLA Anderson. I came back to NYU Stern last year for this role. I've also had some other roles in my time, which I'll talk about in a minute. We have a great panel, which I'll introduce in a sec. But before, I wanted to at least share just some of my experiences. So I've worked in higher education for about 20 years. My first role was running the career office at NYU Stern, and that was in 2000. And, within 2 years, we had to deal with 9/11, which, was tragic for everyone, but probably the most for NYU Stern. We literally had alums that came to Stern for safe haven because they were working on Wall Street and didn't know where else to go. So it impacted us greatly. We lost some of our alums in that time. One of the things that our students at the time did was just try and call each other just to see if everyone was okay. But I will tell you that the class of 2003, which was literally in day 2, when this happened on September 11th, ended up being one of the most connected classes that I can think about in my 20 years working in higher education. And I think it's because they all kind of went through this together, and they figured out a way to build community, even though initially they could not even come to Lower Manhattan because of debris and all the situations. So starting out very traumatically that way, it was a way where they were able to figure out how to rise from the ashes, so to speak, as a class. And they're very connected. They're probably the most networked class I can think of because the market's changed very dramatically then. I was also at NYU Stern in 2008 during the financial crisis. I moved on to the role of Dean of Students. And again, the class of 2010, who was literally, in class for maybe a month or two when this happened, ended up being a very networked group, and they knew that the network was critical and building community was even that much more important. So I've said many times that what we're going through now is almost like 9/11 and the financial crisis, like times 2 or 3 or 4. It's very devastating. We know there could be people that have lost family members, or at least know people that have been affected. So it's a difficult time, but at the same time, you do want to think strategically about how you can build a network that's going to support you and you can support. And to help go through all this, we have an amazing group of panelists. We have Amy Hornstein at Appel from UC Berkeley Haas, and she is Director of Student Experience there. We have Beth Briggs, who's Associate Dean for Career Services at NYU Stern. We have Stephanie Robertson, who's Director of Community Engagement and Inclusion at Duke Fuqua School of Business. And we have Jessica Luchenta, who's Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at UCLA Anderson. So we have a few questions, but we definitely want to leave time for questions at the end. Probably do a few questions for about 20 minutes or so. And then we'll turn it over to questions that start to build. There's a button you can start as they come up, pop in your questions, and we'll definitely try and get to as many as we can. But the first question we're going to start with, and maybe Jessica and Stephanie can help us out with this, and that's how can students build community during this challenging times? And what are examples of ways maybe students are getting involved, maybe in new ways, the ways they haven't in the past? And particularly how are students building community based on how they identify in terms of their social identities, our affinity? Okay. Jessica, you want to start?
Sure, thanks, Gary. So I'll talk a little bit about how and what some of the ways are. So I think the how is, if you've got an idea, try it, right? This is a moment for creativity and for inclusion. And it's not just our typical student leaders who are leading the way. It's everyday students who maybe have not been involved at the highest level in partnering with the administration, but they've got really great ideas. And we encourage everyone to give it a shot. We don't know what's going to work best until we try it. And so I think we've seen a real spectrum of activities from the kind of small micro level to the bigger macro level and every point on the spectrum in between. So an example of something small, in a remote environment, class is done and everyone leaves the Zoom and then it's just like nothing, right? You just go back to your lives. If we were on campus, students would be chatting with each other after class, walking outside, talking about the lecture, asking questions on things they didn't understand, maybe making some plans to study together. So some of our students have started post-class Zoom debriefs where they all get back in on a quick call, whoever would like to, and the professor is not needed. It's just a conversation among peers about what they thought about class today. And I think that's a really tiny way, but a very impactful way to create that sense of network on a daily basis. Kind of middle of the road, you know, we are working on turning all of our club events into a virtual format where it makes sense. We're still doing case competitions in virtual formats, you know, pro bono consulting with small businesses in the area who are suffering. All those sorts of things are on the table right now. In a more lighthearted sense, some of our students have been using their expertise in certain areas to help engage the class. So for example, we did a craft beer tasting where some of our students who are into craft beers sent out a supply list to everyone and the certain beers to buy and what to serve them with, and everyone did it together. And then finally on the macro level, you know, one thing we're all really missing are our Anderson afternoons, which is our Thursday afternoon social hour, social networking hour after class is done for the week. So we are giving it a go this Thursday, the first virtual one. We're going to try it out and use Zoom breakout rooms and random cycling through every 10 to 15 minutes to mix everyone up. And I think it's going to be awesome because, you know, when people head to a big social networking event, they tend to stay in their cliques, right? They look for their friends, they chat with the people they know, and some more than others might make an effort to, you know, reach out across the program, but really not that much. So this is going to necessarily mix everyone up, and I think there'll be new connections made that might not otherwise occur because we're doing it in this way. And we've already had a couple of events where students from our various programs, full-time, part-time, executive, financial engineering, MSBA, are participating in ways that we don't see when we're physically present on campus. So,
great, thank you. Stephanie, you want to add something?
So our students have been phenomenal throughout this process, and they hit the ground running. I think within maybe the second week of us beginning the virtual learning process, we had an inclusion week. It was decided that we should try that out and see what happens. So it's not as easy as you think it would be. There's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of switch over and learn through Zoom and breakout rooms. And this is like now we're all pros. It's like, oh, Zoom this and that, I can do it. But at that point, Gary helped us out with the breakout rooms. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna shut everything down. This is horrible. But once we got comfortable with the platform, the students have been doing so much with it. We've had guest speakers, and it goes from both, you know, more, you know, we still have challenging discussions within this space as well. So we may have dialogues around disability, and we're going to have one on gender tomorrow. We had a huge speaker come and talk about inclusiveness and becoming an inclusive leader. And then we have the more fun activities. And we have a thing called Fuqua Friday. And that happens every Friday, as the title would suggest. But I looked at the different topics we've had or different things we've worked on, and it seems like we've had 4 already, which is, it kind of blows my mind, like where we are at this point. But we had one around Taste and Isolate, which is going to happen tomorrow. It's the wine tasting, so it sounds very similar to the beer tasting. And there's going to be experts that come in. The wine club is going to be co-sponsoring that. We had a Love is Blind thing. I hear Love is Blind is a great kind of show just to like sit there and be a vegetable to. I haven't seen it, but everyone loved it. We had a small group mingle where people would use the breakout rooms to get to know each other. And we have trivia on Thursdays, and I think what I've seen is that more people are coming to the events. And it's not like they're just signing on and then, have their camera off. They're coming and they're showing their faces, they're engaging. And so if we had a daring dialogue, which is a courageous conversation, normally the amount of people that come to that is between 40 and 45. Then when we have tomorrow, 79 people have signed up already. And it's fantastic. It's because the platform we have can allow for that to happen. The students are also getting more creative with Zoom is going to be it, or some other platform. It is what it is at this point. I think we're all going to get over complaining, oh, Zoom again, why? And so be like, this is going to be the way we communicate. Let's think of other creative ways to do that. And I have no doubt the students are working on that right now.
Great, thank you. I know some questions are coming in. Please keep sending them in. We're going to go through a few questions initially. And the next one is actually for Amy. And this is actually a topic that I've talked to both students and even alumnus about. And that's, this concept of community and coping may be different based on people's unique learning styles and just styles of existence, how they see leadership and how they get energy, particularly when you think about people who might be more extroverted, some people might be more introverted. How are students coping differently based on these aspects?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Gary, and thank you, Stephanie and Jessica. I think under stress, people often sort of revert to type. If you're a certain way, it's easy under stress to be even more that way. And in working with MBA students, we think a lot in the end about leadership development, both personal development as well as leadership development. And so I think this COVID-19 moment is an extraordinary one to we all have been required to step back, to pause, to reflect. And so in some ways, how can we build on those strengths of who we are? I see the extroverted students being super extroverted and the introverted students can step further back. But at the same time, how can we use this opportunity to push beyond what we would ordinarily do? And in some ways, turning everything on its head, requiring us to be on a platform like Zoom when we're used to running into each other in person, creates unique opportunities. Some of the most useful feedback I ever received from a student leader, she observed of me that I was an external processor, but which I learned meant I thought by talking. I'm an extrovert. And on these circumstances, I think there's more opportunity for a student who has a personality more like mine to step back a little bit. I can't dominate a Zoom meeting. I need to step back and can be fuller participation. What I'm impressed with the Haas MBA students in this current environment, they're creating new opportunities for different kinds of one-on-one interactions, small groups, big groups. And I've experienced something of an introvert's liberation movement over the past few years. Much in business school and in the business world privileges extroverts. And during our orientation week, people would say, we need a quiet room. We need to step away from the full class. And so I think that's happened very naturally in this environment while we're social distancing and sheltering in place. Physical distancing, I would say, not social. And I've been really impressed. Our students have echoed some of the things I heard Jessica and Stephanie report. There was some thought early on, there were articles that this environment would be an introvert's paradise, that it would be perfect because those are people who wanted to shelter in place. But I don't think that's necessarily true. And I've been impressed with students as they've tried to learn and develop in different ways. Introverts are more likely to want to engage with the world first and then they want to engage and learn by actually being out there. Introverts tend to want to observe and then engage. I think we're all being required to observe. And so for the extroverts, it's an opportunity to grow and change. And I've seen some introverts step up because while networking or socializing in person may sometimes be intimidating or overwhelming, they can manage it better in this virtual environment. So I think we can both, I've seen students build on their strengths as well as try out new ways of interacting. I've been super impressed with the opportunities for students developing compassion and resilience in this environment. And I think that has strengthened our community at Berkeley Haas, and I imagine at all the other schools as well. I initiated an outreach program from my team where we've reached out individually to all 571 students in our program to see how they're doing. And what impresses me is how many people actively say, how are you? How are you coping? Is your family okay? And that's impressed me. At first, for MBA students who are high achieving and sometimes demanding and whose expectations are so high, this has been a super disappointing time. This is not what they expected. But as people have adapted, the opportunities for resilience have been so impressive. In fact, one of our student leaders started a Slack channel labeled Resilience, where people are sharing resources and materials to learn about that. Students have supported each other. Alumni have been enormously supportive, especially as Gary mentioned, the alums who graduated during earlier periods of great challenge. And then the students are supporting each other in, as they always do, but now in new and different ways. We've had loss in our community already, and I think that creates opportunities to support each other. And again, the compassion has been impressive. So it's challenging, but because we've moved out of our business as usual environment, I think it's helped students to reflect on who they are, who they want to be. There's been good outreach, as Jessica mentioned, moving kind of beyond friendship circles, where the more outgoing, popular, often single people find each other and socialize a lot. Some stepping back from that, and like Jessica, I've seen our students do more outreach to our evening weekend MBA students and executive MBA students, and really leverage the power of our Haas network beyond just their own friends and classmates. So it's challenging, but there have been new opportunities, and I've been really impressed with how students are using this time to reflect and learn and get the most they can out of this tough semester.
Thank you, Amy. Great insights. I really appreciate that. So we know that we have a couple of different audiences that's here. We have some folks that are about to enter their MBA program. We have some folks that are in an MBA program. We have some folks that are alums. And I think this question probably, resonates for all those audiences. And I asked Beth to take the lead on this. And that's really about what students are doing for themselves and their classmates to build networks and to think about their future careers. And if anything, is there some sort of upside to the situation we're in? Is there an opportunity, particularly to live the things that Forté talks about a lot, more women leading, that concept? What does this situation allow people to do in this space?
Thanks so much, Gary, and you should feel free to jump in. I have the benefit of having when I joined Stern, Gary was the dean of students, but is also overseeing careers. So I get to learn from my mentors throughout this process, which has been something I would recommend to everyone, is ask for help when you need it. There's a lot of people who've been through these situations before, whether they're within your network or people and everyone's willing to help, which is, I think, something, because we are all in this together. And thanks for joining us on this panel today. It's really nice to have the opportunity to speak with you. When I was thinking about this and thinking about some of the questions, one of the things that popped up for me, which is not exactly related to the question, Gary, but the articles that have been going around about how the countries that are led by women have been able to move through this experience in a much more successful way. And that's being attributed to two things, really: very strong, deliberate action, as well as the trust that the people who live in the countries where these women were leaders have in that leadership. So I thought that was a impressive thing to see. I think that it will help us to advance women in leadership roles because we can point to very specific data-driven outcomes now. We have those already, but this is a pretty clear one. In terms of building community and how it serves your career, I think a lot of what Amy was sharing, at first it felt like, well, how can we do this? How can we continue to network when we're all virtual? But what we're finding for NYU Stern students, and I know this is happening across all the top business school programs, is that students are incredibly resourceful. And because we're in this shared connective environment, people that our students are reaching out to are more receptive to connect with them. One of the things we talk to our students about, and I think this comes naturally, is that you're reaching out first just on a point of human connection. So it's not about, I want to find out what's happening. Are you hiring? I want to know about future roles. The first point of connection in any kind of network is that genuine, how are you? How is your family? I hope you're doing okay. One of the things that one of my colleagues pointed out is how while we are apart from each other, we're kind of in this more intimate connection. We're in each other's living rooms. I can't get these virtual backgrounds to work, so you're kind of in my home with me. And when I've been working with alumni as well as current students, there's just sort of this like, wow, tell me about that book behind you, or look at my pet, or, we've had lots of partners and children coming into the Zoom screens. And I think it gives us a unique insight into all of our humanity, which we don't often get in sort of a more formalized kind of buttoned up network situation. So I think there's way more opportunity that can come from this format than I would have thought 4 weeks ago when we first came into this world. I do think that there is access that has just increased, because when our students want to network and go to someone's office, now the scope of people you can connect with in kind of an in-person format has just increased tremendously. Being able to have alumni sit on panels who are based in California, where in the past we wouldn't have done that because we would have wanted them there in person. So just the access has also increased significantly. So I think it's a really good time to build your network. One of the things we say to our students is you should always be job seeking, right? No matter what. If you have your internship, if you have your full-time role, if you're just starting, you always want to be in the process of staying connected to the people who are part of your story. And it's a great time to re-engage with people. There's a very natural way to check in that's genuine and just update them on how you're doing. Amy, Stephanie, and Jessica all shared some of the unique ways that the schools are approaching this. So are you working with a small business? Are you taking this opportunity to do something innovative with your classmates? Like, these are things that you can be sharing. I also think it's an incredible time to be in business school because you're learning in real time from experts in their field about how the virus is impacting all these different parts of the business world. And the insights you might be gaining in the classroom or in the reading you're doing or the virtual meetups you're going to, people who are working full-time don't have access to that. So you being able to share that information is a really natural way to connect over networking or to be able to follow up with someone. I feel like I just said a lot, Gary. So if you have other insights to add, but I think when this started, I had the same kind of fears. I think Stephanie was talking about like, oh my, how do we ever do all this on Zoom? And it's been incredible how seamlessly everyone's really adapted into this new world. Even our employer partners, they just like hit the ground running. They were very transparent with our students about what their hiring plans are, which was the most important thing, what you want to see in good leadership. We're working on plans for the fall. We're working on contingency plans to the contingency plans because we don't know, but we do know there will be recruiting. How it happens, we're not 100% sure. We will get students ready to do it all sorts of ways. But the more honest and clear communication that can come is what I'm finding to be the most beneficial.
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything great, Beth. Thank you. And, I think that Well, in terms of asking for help, we talked about me moderating Pamela, folks from the class of 2010.
I looped him into that because they all said yes when I said Gary was the moderator.
I don't know about that part. I think they just wanted to kind of get together and see each other. But I do think that that concept of having conversations with people that were in business school this time can be really valuable. So I'm going to cheat a little and answer one of the first questions about networking in this time. I think it's one of these situations where we're 3 or 4 weeks into this kind of new normal, depending on where you are in the country or the world. And now people have gotten to, adjusting. There were some things we had to do initially, and now it's kind of not scaled back, but I think we've gotten used to this pace now. And so now is a good time to have conversations with people, and not assuming that anyone has a job opening, but the fact that you're just trying to network and connect with people in the hopes that down the road something opens. So I think that that's definitely talking to people that, like I said, class of 2003, class of 2010, they've really experienced this kind of situation while they were in business school. So it's good to learn from those folks. So our last question, before we open it up to the audience, is we really talked a lot about networks and community and preserving your sanity. And I want to go back to Jessica and Stephanie to cover this last question in terms of what are these sanity preservation methods? Like, what does self-care look like as an MBA student or somebody just getting through all of this?
Stephanie, would you like?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think going into this, Fuqua has been really great at having a platform for students to talk about their well-being and specifically about their mental health. And so we were already coming into this with that frame of mind. But what I've discovered has happened because of this platform that we're in now, this kind of virtual world that we're living in, is that people are even more open about it, about their how they're feeling and what they need from us to make sure they're okay and they're supported. And so we've already had a couple of mental health forums. We had one mental health forum. We're going to have another one next week and have breakout rooms. And a lot of students are coming to these sessions as well. I've heard of sections, both first and second years, that have had their own kind of conversations. I mean, the more intimate conversations with some of the students that they know a little more intimately. But as far as just being open about this now, it has been amazing to see. And I think that is across the board. I think just this country and the world is now destigmatizing some of the things that go with mental health. And I think that is going to help make supporting our students so much easier because now we'll know exactly what they need. We also have a lot of connections with our Student Wellness Center and our CAPS office as well. And they're staying there for our students. And I think a lot of times we don't see those particular groups as people who will support the grad students, but they're like, we're here until you don't need us. And I don't think it's happening anytime soon. I think there's always going to be needed, but like we're going to be here to support the business students. And so that's also from it's like one-on-one counseling or group therapy, but also mindfulness activities. That's all been converted to online as well. And like I said, it's just been pretty phenomenal to see how the communities come together to discuss, be open about mental health, and figure out as a community how we're going to support each other during this time.
Great, thanks. Jessica, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. And we're experiencing and doing lots of the same things. So I'll try not to go back over similar territory. But one new thing that we are trying, in addition to all of the mental health and wellness activities that we would normally do, that we've converted to virtual format, is a 5-week. We're coming up with the right name for it, but it's basically group therapy. It's sessions on topics. So instead of having to reach out to an individual therapist at Anderson or at UCLA and say, I need help, I need an individual session, we're creating groups of students to come together to talk about a couple of topics each week. It's an hour-long session, and the topics might be stress management and time management. And it's really intended to create a sense of community, to create a conversation, and to get people to reflect. Everybody can go onto Google and find a million articles, right, on time management or stress relief. We can all do that. But then do we actually do those things? are we actually doing the self-care? So these groups are intended to get people thinking about what are the mental, psychological, emotional blocks that they might have to getting to that place where they are taking the actions to take care of themselves. Another subject is going to be radical self-acceptance and self-compassion. So these are really interesting topics, and we're hoping it reaches a portion of our student audience who might not be as ready and willing to raise their hand and say, yes, I need some help, I'm struggling. So we'll be rolling those out in the second half of our quarter, which will start in a couple of weeks. So we're really excited to be trying something that, number one, I would love to do in a regular environment, right? But even more so in this time with COVID-19.
Thank you. And thank you to all the panelists. These are great ideas. And regardless of what stage you're in, whether you're thinking about going to business school, whether you're in business school or you're an alum, I definitely encourage you to not only take these ideas, but to start to embody them, particularly with your circle, whether it's classmates or people in your personal life. You know, I think these are things that you can apply in general. We have a few questions we're going to go to. The first is, I think I answered one initially, but will the online class affect the MBA value under the COVID-19 situation? Now, I'll take a crack at that, and certainly if anyone wants to jump in, please feel free to. You know, I think the MBA, it's kind of like a long-term degree. I think about me, every career move I've made, even in higher education, has been related to the fact that I got an MBA and I was able to use the skills that I picked up from business school. So it's definitely a long-term, you know, degree. And I think employers will still see it that way. Whether you're trying to do something as a startup and you're trying to get venture capital funding, I think people see it that way as well too. So I think that it's, we're obviously in a difficult short-term situation, but I think in terms of long-term, it's not going to certainly devalue it. If anything, I think Jessica and some other folks brought up is that this is a unique time, and to use it as a learning experience and a reaction, how to react from this situation, is something that can be really beneficial for folks. So I'm going to go to the next question since I saw the panelists nod. Certainly feel free to jump in though. And this is a career-related question, so maybe I initially started with Beth, but I will say that when Amy Orlov comes back to close, there's a couple of other upcoming seminars, webinars on career-focused topics. So definitely you'll get some information towards the end of this webinar on that. So look out for that. So the question is, how are MBA programs planning to do MBA recruiting virtually? And if they have to, and do you have any advice for MBA students who may have to recruit virtually? So I'll turn that over to you, Beth.
Sure. Thank you for the question. You know, I think if I wish I had a crystal ball, because I get asked so many questions around like, when will this end? Even from my own team, when are we going back to the office? And I keep joking that I didn't work in career services because I like working remotely. There's a reason that one chooses to work in higher ed, to be with people. So we don't know, but I will tell you that it seems as though all the schools and all the companies are doing parallel paths. What's most important probably to get through is that companies are coming to campus in the same way that they've always come, meaning that they're looking for the same amount of talent, which at this point in time, that's what we're seeing, which is probably what is most important to me, is that our students continue to have the opportunities to recruit for a variety of roles and functions at a variety of companies. Being prepared to recruit virtually, we've been working, and I'm sure all the schools are doing this, on putting together what it's like to recruit virtually. We've always had information on video interviewing. We know a lot of the technology companies have almost done their entire process virtually, and our students have been successful in that format. So this has been going on for some time, and there's companies that know how to do this well. Companies are sharing information with each other, just like the schools are sharing information with one another. I'm preparing for both, and we're going to have our students prepare for both. It will look a little different, but I think using some of the technology, Zoom with the breakout rooms, being able to pair people, I actually think you may have more access to recruiters and company representatives than you might have had in a regular kind of big room format. Virtual interviewing is just something you practice, and virtual networking is something that we will practice. We will work with everyone to make sure they're comfortable using the formats we know our employer partners are going to use. We've always done mock interviews over video to practice if that's something a student wants to do. We're going to all get really, really good at it. And just based on the outcomes of companies that have always recruited this way, I don't see a difference in how it ultimately works. It's just adapting to a new style, making sure your background looks good, knowing how to answer the questions, using the cameras. So I'm hoping we'll all be in person, but we're totally preparing that it may not happen that way for the incoming fall recruiting timeline. But Gary, feel free to add anything if you think.
No, I think you covered it well. I think these are just unique times, and I think that the ability for those to adapt and adjust, which is a skill set that people need to have, whether they want to be effective, in an organization, and certainly as a leader. And so this is one of those things that allows you to do that.
And this is a time, if you're working or with friends, like practice Zoom, get really good at it, because I keep saying that to my current students, you're taking classes through Zoom, you're learning way more than some other people know how to do. So if you have time, play with the technology platforms and just get pretty comfortable with how to use it and adapt it. Thanks, Gare. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Sure, no, it was great. So we have another question. We have one that came up in the chat too, but we'll cover the one Q&A side first. And it's like, what advice will you give to incoming students in terms of how they leverage this time before starting school? I love that question because there's so many ways you can go with it. So maybe anyone who wants to take a crack at it, go for it.
Real quick, I can just network. It's just network. If there's any type of kind of area or industry that you're particularly interested in, learn about it and then network with people in it. And then once you get to business school, it's a quick turnaround as far as like what you're going to be recruiting for. So you have the time now to do that and actually have the people who are experts in those industries talk to you about it. Like I've had, chief diversity officers of the huge companies respond to me faster than ever because they have the time, they do. They've always wanted to talk to you, but now it's just there's an opportunity to do it. So definitely research and network as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. There was a question about if you just recently got accepted into a program, should you consider deferring? And I'll start, but certainly if people have other thoughts, I think the decision to defer is a personal choice, but I think it has to be based on what the reason is behind that. An MBA takes typically 2 years. There's certainly 1-year programs as well. And we don't know how the world is going to be in a year or two, how it's going to have adapted. And again, going back to something we were just talking about, those who are able to adapt quicker end up being in a better position in the future. And so I think that certainly there's legitimate reasons for someone to say, I need to not go this year because it could be a family situation, it could be lots of things that aren't in the mix of that question. So each answer would be different based on someone's situation. But if it's strictly just based on the fact that we're dealing with COVID-19, I would say that everyone's dealing with it. So it's not that just some people are dealing with it. The world is dealing with it. And so the ability to adapt is a skill that we all need to further, sharpen. So that's what I would say. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on it.
I would throw in something that participants might not have considered, and Gary was intimating at this, but the extra value that you actually might receive during this time of completing an MBA during this crisis. So we are adding more courses to our roster almost every week, and some of them are directly about COVID-19 and the economic impact and what's going on globally and nationally and locally. So if you want to be in an MBA program at the time when all of this research and learning and adaptation to a new way of being is happening, I think that could be actually quite exciting. And yes, it may look different. I think everyone on this call probably is, fingers double crossed that we are in person by fall, but we don't know, right? But even if we're not, I think there's still a lot of value to be had from the experience. And of course, as Gary mentioned earlier, obtaining the degree sticks with you for the rest of your life. And that won't go away. That's never going to be lost, and no matter when you do your MBA.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So another kind of career-related question. It's for those who lost internships this summer or unable to find virtual internships. What skills can be built over the summer in lieu of this? I can start, Beth, and then I'll probably eventually turn it over to you. So I think, one thing that we actually at NYU had an all-staff meeting, and I was fortunate to, get to say a few words. I guess I drew the right cards or something. But one of the things I ended on in my chat was about how it's definitely unprecedented times. And at this time, you really want to think about the fact that anyone in that room, in that, that session, has a certain amount of privilege. The fact that we were all working at NYU and we're all safe and healthy is a thing that in a typical day you wouldn't think is privilege, but it is. And so we talked about privilege. We also talked about gratitude and how there are some things that we typically wouldn't be thankful for. But now we have to think about that and be thankful for it. And the reason I bring that up is that I think this is a time to figure out how you can help somebody and help someone or groups of people that maybe are struggling. You hear some of the stories and it's really tough to listen to, whether it's healthcare workers, whether it's teachers, whether it's any of these service providers, people that have lost businesses or maybe losing businesses. I think figuring out how if you have that extra time and how you can contribute to helping us get back to where we should be, I think is such a worthy experience if you have time to do it. And I think it'll be, you'll probably have some great stories to tell when you get, get back to your program. So I'll turn over to Beth if she has some other thoughts on that.
I think those are great ideas, Gary. We actually had a call with the New York City Small Business Services group yesterday afternoon, and that's exactly what they're looking for. They're just trying to find people who can help small businesses know how to navigate even just the paperwork to apply for some of the aid that might be available. Apart from that, if that's not something you're able to access, one of the things we've been talking about is some sort of skills building. So I know through NYU Stern, and I'm sure this is true at the other schools, through LinkedIn Learning, you have access to all kinds of courses. This is a great time to learn how to do Python or get really advanced and deep on data analytics. We know recruiters, we've heard from them already, they're not going to be looking for the perfect experience over the summer of 2020. You're going to have this on your resume for the rest of your life, just like Gary was saying, those classes of 03 or 10, the class of 2021, 2020, 2022, people are going to know, oh, you were in business school during that time, which is going to speak to who you are, your resilience, like the skills. What did you do during that time when you had this moment to be in business school? I think it's really a place to build from. And working on building out a skill set or helping a small business, when you're speaking to a potential recruiter in the fall, that's just as valuable as what might have been like that perfect internship that you thought you needed to get for the summer. People are going to be looking for who you are, what you did, and what you learned and took away from it over this particular summer, more than just looking for a name, looking for that quote unquote perfect MBA internship. I think it gives you a lot more flexibility. I think this is the summer that actually lets you, you're in this sort of plan, this path, and now things got taken away. So it lets you kind of go back to like, well, maybe I really wanted to do this other exciting thing, but I left that behind, and maybe it's a chance to come back to it.
Thank you, Beth. And I want to thank everyone. I've known the four of you many, many years, it seems like. So I just think that it's great that we're able to get together and share your thoughts and wisdom on this. I want to turn it back over to Amy. She's going to maybe talk about some of the things that's upcoming with Forté, and particularly, maybe the conference as well too. So, Amy?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Gary, Beth, Jessica, Stephanie, Amy. You all are fabulous, and we really appreciate that. I think Gary just said something about gratitude, and I can't even express enough gratitude. We were really happy that you shared your advice and insights with our MBA community. I do want to say that this is part of an ongoing series, 6 weeks. You know, we're saying log in and level up, don't quarantine your career. And to that end, next week's session will be a panel of just career services folks, talking about a lot of the topics that we talked about today, but in more depth, about what if you lost your internship? What if you now don't have a full-time job? So tune in next week for that. I actually, I just checked in with our team, and the email invite for that is going to go out tomorrow, so you should be receiving it. Also, I put something in the chat box, which is a link to the entire series. There were some topics that came up here today about how do you really network really creatively during this time period, and also how do you take best advantage of this downtime, if you will, and this off time. We are specifically trying to design these for certain audiences, for professionals, for college students, and for MBA students, so that we don't leave anything out, but that doesn't mean that you're not invited to all of them. And a lot of the ones earlier today covered a lot of those same topics that I just reiterated. So feel free to check out the recordings of those. And then finally, the last thing that I want to say is, for those MBA students who are interested in, you know, still really kind of getting together and networking, this is a time when Forté would normally be doing our Fast Track to Finance conference. You'd be getting a lot of messages, and our MBA annual leadership conference. And we are still doing them just virtually. So I don't know who said it before, but get comfortable with Zoom, get comfortable with digital formats. But I have to tell you that we've done virtual events now for over 14 years. I think we're pretty good at it at Forté. And I know that our sponsors and our schools are really excited to meet with you and connect with you at both events. So you should be receiving emails if you're an incoming MBA student. You should be receiving emails about those conferences. Great. Anything else, Gary, that I forgot?
No, I think you covered everything. And again, I want to thank Amy and Jessica and Beth and Stephanie, just in terms of your time. I'm grateful for them as well too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.